So I'm Jim Clawley. I'm a 47-year-old professional. We got an interesting story because me and Aaron originally disagreed on a subject on LinkedIn, and then found we had some quite close ideas on loss, grieving, and the current situation that it's had with my family personally. And Aaron asked me to do a piece today about my father. I lost my father last year. My dad, Paul, passed away of cancer last year in the May. He'd been trying to get diagnosed by his local GP on several occasions with a persistent cough, and they were just talking to him over the phone. Unfortunately, he collapsed in April. 2 days later, we found out he had terminal cancer of some sort, and then 2 days after that, my dad was gone. And I think it left the family. Obviously there's grieving involved in it, but it left a deep sense of, wanting to ask final questions, but also for me, looking at the wider picture of what COVID has created and how people aren't getting seen, they're not getting looked at for cancer, and we've almost created this league table of what is a more important virus or illness these days, and I just don't agree with it. I think there's a big loss and big damage being created right now. I read there's about 3.7 million people with cancer awaiting initial screening and midway through their treatment. And I think it's a really damning indictment of how this is being run and what's being forgotten. I'm trying to bring awareness to, not forgetting this, but also, really pushing harder for people with cancer and their families to get the best treatment possible and not leave it to a situation like my father, and more importantly my mom, who has MS. She's wheelchair bound now, and she's relying on me, my sister and my brother to sort of look around her, as well as care companies to look after her, when my dad could have been given a fighting chance to survive and get proper treatment for his cancer. So really, that's the discussion I want to open up. I'm sure there's a lot of people like me. I don't want to be a victim in this, and I'm not going to be a victim in all this, but I think there has to be some serious questions about how people are treated and how they're screened and looked after in terms of their private health, because we're saying things. We're saying don't leave coughs untreated, don't do this, don't do that. But when the reality is people are looking for that health and they're looking for that treatment, they're not getting it. And that's a real damning indictment of our health service, I hate to say it. My wife was a nurse and a midwife for 20 years, so I should be very pro this, but there's big gaps. There's people's livelihoods and their health falling through the holes here, and something needs doing about it.
So once this discussion is done, what do you want to see come from this discussion?
Personally, I want to see change. I want to see change in the way that it's screened. I think, I've got friends, and it leads to open discussion. They're all good guys as well. I've got friends that are GPs, but, I see this kind of lack of speciality in this function of GPs to hospital, and we're seeing, particularly at Wolverhampton, the staff were lovely with my dad. When my dad was on his final days, they were really courteous with us, really compassionate with us as a family, and given it was still in the middle of lockdown, we were allowed to spend, our final hours with him as a family, which was really important for us. And I know a lot of people didn't get that chance to do that. But I think what you see subsequently with kind of social care and GPs, hospitals, so on and so forth, there's a real big disconnect, and we kind of put it under the umbrella of NHS, but there's so many different facets to it. And there's no singularity to the way that different trusts and foundations communicate with each other. And you look at it and you think, surely there's a more streamlined way of a patient or someone with health fears going from A to B to C in a way that isn't so laboured and drawn out, so they're lacking it. The NHS now gets something in the region of 133 billion pounds of funding compared to 31 billion probably 20 years ago. And obviously, for interest and things like that, there's always going to be growth on that. But another interesting factor is there's nearly 100,000 beds have been cut from the frontline hospitals. So it feels like we're using, and I was glad the British Medical Institute spoke out about this, I felt like we were using nurses as a propaganda tool for the NHS to sort of say protect our NHS, when functionally it's being misrun, it's being mismanaged, it's being misrun. And I think with that finance and that funding, it can be run in a better way that protects people's livelihoods and also their families and their loved ones, because that's really what it's there for in the first instance, is to help people get over these illnesses and get them on the road to recovery, because the devastation it leaves to families left behind when it is avoidable is incomprehensible. And for me, it's more my mom. She's not only lost her soulmate, but my dad was insistent, you know, he's that generation of, he wanted to be my mom's primary carer because she's in a wheelchair, and now she doesn't have that, she doesn't have that soulmate, and you're left with that question of what could have been done. So it's really, this dialogue is not to be woe is me, it's to be, look, there needs to be some changes here, there needs to be some proper dialogue, and not just talk, action towards making things better, because it is easily achievable if the right people get in the right room with the right ideas to make it a better system.
Who do you think needs to be held accountable?
I don't like to say the royal government, because I think it's easy to make that excuse with it, but you know, politics and politicians in general, they need to start working cross-party so that people running these health committees start looking at how do we make a more functional health service that helps people in a more dynamic way and stops letting things drop through the floor. Seeing too many things where it's almost become, with everything outside of COVID has become unimportant. And I look at the Office of National Statistics on quite a lot of occasions there, and every COVID death had 86% underlying illness. And that concerned me, because with those underlying illnesses, how many are cancers, how many are long-term and respiratory illnesses that we're almost forgetting about for the sake of one thing. And I think we have to be more dynamic in looking at our health services there for everybody, not just one subsection of the community. And we've got to be, looking at how the GPs communicate with the health services, with social care, so that communication is benefiting the families it's supposed to be there to protect. Right now it's too broken and fragmented, and we do have the money to fund it. It's just how it's managed and coordinated that really has to change, and that has to come from the top. It has to be a government initiative, but the parties have to stop throwing mud at one another and actually work cross-party to help the public on this, because otherwise it's just gonna fall through the floors. So really what I'm trying to do is get people to leave video comments, raise a discussion. You don't have to agree with me on this, but get to a point where we're actually going, you know what, that makes sense, and then let's push that narrative forward so we make official changes. So what I'd say is, please watch this video, leave a video comment, let's all have a proper healthy debate here instead of shouting at each other. You might disagree with my point of view, but it's to get to this grey area of where we want to move forward progressively in this matter.